Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Satyam Kumar and today's video we are going to reading Spring Framework notes. So session 19 topic is Spring Bean Scope. So let's start this video. If you're learning Spring Framework or aiming to become full stack Java, then this notes is very important for you. So let's start this video. So Spring Bean scopes. We can make the IOC container to keep Spring Bean class object in different scopes. The Spring Bean scope in 6.x and 5.x version are: first is singleton, second prototype, third request, and next session, next application, next WebSocket. Can be used in singleton, can be used in stand-alone apps, can be used, can be also in web application. Okay, so these two are prototype and singleton are can be used in standalone application and also in web application. Is in standalone apps we can keep the data in the follow scope: a block scope, B method and local scope, and C instance scope, and D class scope, and E thread scope. Okay, so in web application of Java, we can keep data the following scope: request scope, session scope, page scope, and application scope. So these four: request, session, application, WebSocket can be used only in web applications and RESTful applications, distribute apps. So to specify the Spring Bean scope, can we use scope. To specify the Spring Bean scope, we use scope attribute of bin tag in XML driven configuration. No, so not so important. Okay, so XML driven configuration not so important. To specify the Spring Bean scope, we use @scope annotation in annotation driven configuration. So required here. Okay, so @annotation in XML driven configuration, and @scope is class level, method level annotation. @scope is class level, method level annotation. It can be applied on the top of the class and on the top of the method. Note, we generally use @scope annotation along with @component annotation and along with @bin annotation. What is singleton Java class? What is singleton Java class? The Java class that allow to us create only one object in any situation is called as singleton Java class. The Java class that allow us to create only one object in any situation is called as singleton Java class. Note, instead of creating multiple object for Java class either with no data or with fixed data or with shareable data where memory and CPU time will be wasted, it is recommended to create single object and use it for multiple time to use the memory and CPU effectively. Note, the class the class that allow us to create only one object in any situation is called singleton class. Single means one, ton means object, one object. Note, through Java class allow us to create multiple object. We If we are happy with creating single object for that class, then that Java class is not called as a singleton Java class. Through Java class allow us to create multiple object. If we are happy with creating single object for that class, then that Java class is not called as singleton Java class. For servlet component class, The servlet container creates single object through servlet component class allow to have multiple objects, so we cannot say servlet component class is single that class Java class. Through programmer want to create multiple object, the class singleton Java class allow us to create only one object in my in any situation. Okay. Predefined Java classes are java.lang.runtime, java.awt desktop, java org.apache.log4j.logger, and etc. So to develop user-defined Java class as the singleton Java class, minimum standard. Single means one, ton means object, one object. Close all the door of creating the Java class object being from the outside of the class and open only one door. Static factory method to create the object by checking whether object is already created or not. Singleton logic. A a keep uh, keep the private constructor to stop the utilization of new operator outside the class. Keep the constructor private to stop utilization of new operator outside of the class. B. Take private static reference variable of public create current current class type to hold that single object reference. And C. Public static factory method having singleton logic to check whether object is created or not and to return that single object reference. So here one project IOC project 07 singleton class core Java. So having one folder Java main folder and one package, two package, दूसरा package com.nd.singleton ston package having one printer.java and com.nd.test singleton Java singleton test.java class. So in printer, public class printer, public private static printer instance, and private constructor, private printer, and zero param constructor. Okay, so one method here, public static printer get instance. If instance equals to null, instance equals to new printer. Okay, if instance equal to null, here null na. So instance equals to null, then create instance equals to new printer and return instance. Okay, so public void print message, one another method for any printing one message, print message string message system.out.println and message printing. Okay, so client app package com.ad.test import printer this and public class singleton test, public static void main string args printer p1 equals to printer dot get instance. Okay, printer p2 equals to printer dot get instance app and system.out.println p1 dot hash code gap p1 dot p2 dot hash code, checking p1 hash code and p2 hash code is equals or not, and checking also p1 equals to p2. So print same hash code and p1 equals to p2 true. One object can be printed by multiple reference variable. Generally, we take static or final static variable in uppercase letter for differentiation. Differentiation and double equal to operator is given for reference comparison, like to check whether two reference variable are pointing to the same object or not. And one another equals method equals method is given to content comparison, like to check whether two objects of Java class are having same content or not. Whenever class is loaded, the static variable will also be loaded and will be initialized with default value or initialize values, initial values, sorry, default values and initial values. Spring 6.x, 5.x and 6.x version, we have six scope of Spring with singleton, default, prototype, request, session, application, WebSocket. To develop more perfect singleton Java class, we need to consider adding the additional option on the above singleton Java class. A, protection from multiple threaded environment. B, protection from deserialization. C, protection for cloning, protection for reflexing API, protection for custom class loader. For all these pages, okay. To specify the scope using @scope annotation in annotation driven configuration along with @component and @bean annotation. @scope singleton or bean scope equals to singleton. It is the default scope for Spring Bean. If no scope the specify in this scope the IOC container creating single object for the Spring Bean class with respect to Bean ID and Spring Bean class and keep that object in the internal cache of the IOC container to reuse the object across the multiple calls given to ctx.getBean method. Having the bean same ID and across the multiple injections at that component of this message generator WMG at that scope singleton public class with message generator, and we write singleton in a scope notation at that configuration in a app configuration at that component scan base package, and here is one bean addresses. So at that bean name equals to dt, and at that scope singleton public create date return new date, and at the rate bean name equals to dt1 at the rate scope singleton public date create date new return new date. So we write here scope singleton, and also here also at the rate scope singleton. So in application context XML, so bean id wmg scope singleton class com.nd.sbin with message generator and property name time equal reference l time, property name date and reference l date. So this is scope. How to write in XML scope equals to singleton. How to write in bean method, bean method direct bean uh, at that scope name equals to dt and write scope singleton. In how to write in directly in the this message generator class directly at that scope singleton. So in checking in client and main class path ctx.new class path xml context and application context calling a xml file, and this message generator wmg equals to ctx.get bean wmg this message generator dot class wmg2 wmg3 and checking wmg1 has code is uh, wmg has code, wmg2 has code, and wmg3 has code are similar or not. So in system.out.println double equals to using and checking these hash codes are equals or not. So wmg1 equals to wmg2 and wmg2 equals to wmg3 and wmg1 equals to wmg3. Internal cache of IOC container, with message generator object reference, date class object reference, dt1 date class object reference. Only singleton scope Spring Bean participate in the pre-earlier yearger yearly instantiation, and they are also will be kept in the internal cache of IOC container for reusability. 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 Coming to this message generator target class, importing local date time at that component with message generator at that singleton at that singleton public class with message generator auto-wired qualifier dt private local date time LDT has a property, and public with message generator zero parent constructor and logic. And we can get a Spring Bean count and Spring Bean IDs from the IOC container as shown below. So client app system.println and all means ID count ctx.getBean definition count and ctx array dot to string ctx.getBean definition name. Output is all bean IDs 8 and all bean IDs. So these are bean IDs. App config, this message generator, and L time, L date. Bean IDs of container generator is Spring Bean. In app config, at that configuration, at that component scan, base package equals to com.id as beans. Public class configuration, app config, public app config, zero parent constructor, and at that bean name equals to dt, at that scope, singleton, public local local date time, create LDT system.println app config create LDT and return local date time dot now. So at that bean name equals to dt1 and at that scope singleton public local date time create LDT1. So uh, returning local date time dot now. So coming to public class dependency injection test class, public static void main string args. So creating IOC container and annotation config application context ctx equals to new annotation config application context and calling app config dot class this message generator equals to ctx dot get bean this message generator dot class this message generator 1 equals to ctx dot get bean wmg this message generator dot class, and also one another this message generator 2 ctx dot get bean this message generator dot class. So creating here three objects and checking these objects are same or not. So generator has code, generator 1 has code, generator 2 dot has code. So checking generator equals to generator 1 and generator 1 equals to generator 2. So output is true and output is true. So all are same. Checking to another local date time LDT1 equals to ctx dot get bean dt local date time dot class and local date time LDT2 equals to ctx dot get bean LDT local date time dot class, and checking these objects hash code are same or not. So gives the same hash code. Okay, so these objects having same hash code. Coming to another LDT and LDT4 two objects and checking to these two hash code. So same give the same hash code. Okay, so gives the same hash code. When should I take Spring Bean class as a single telescope Spring Bean? When should I take Spring Bean class as a singleton scope Spring Bean? If Spring Bean class is not having state date data, state oblique data, no appropriate declaration. If Spring Bean class having only fixed state, oblique data, only final properties, declaration. If Spring Bean class is having only shareable state, oblique data, the state that can be shared across the multiple classes like class holding countries information. Does the singleton scope make the Spring Bean class as the singleton Java class? No. Does the singleton scope make the Spring Bean class as the singleton Java class? No. Our Spring Bean class of Spring Bean class does not become singleton Java class, but it makes the IOC container to create single object for Spring Bean class with respect to bean ID without making the Java class as the singleton Java class. We can make the Spring Bean class just having only one object through singleton scope of the IOC container. Note, without taking Spring Bean class as a singleton class, if want to get singleton class effect on the Spring Bean, then we need to take Spring Bean scope as a singleton. Singleton Java class allow us to create single object because of the logic placed inside the class and class level restriction to create single object. For singleton scope Spring Bean, the IOC container creates single object through single Spring Bean class is normal class and allow to create multiple objects directly because the class is normal class. So IOC container IOC container level restriction to create single object. So what happened if we make the real singleton? What happened if make the real singleton Java class as a singleton scope Spring Bean? If we configure same singleton Java class as the multiple Spring Bean with different bean IDs by enabling constructor-based object creation, then not possible to enable annotation-driven configuration. Based object creation, then the singleton pattern can be broken. If we enable factory method based intra instantiation, instantiation, then the singleton pattern can be not broken. So solution code using factory method based bean instantiation in bean bean method. So here one package com nt and stern importing component and that component this is a comment out. So public class printer private static printer instance and zero param constructor message public static printer in get instance. If instance equals to null, then instance equals to new print return instance and public void print message. So coming to app config.java bean name equals to dt and scope singleton public date create date one and message printing and return new date. So object one for data class having name dt1 and another bean bean name equals to dt2 scope singleton and create date2 and return date. So object 2 for date class having name dt2 coming to app config.class and that bean name equals to prn1 and returning printer dot get instance and at that name at that bean name equals to prn2 printer create printer returning printer dot get instance. So default scope is a single ton here same singleton Java class is configuration as the Spring Bean having two different bean IDs with the default scope is singleton. So app config printer p1 equals to ctx dot get bean prn1 printer dot class and one another object p2 and checking these hash code are same or not. So give the same hash code. And printer P11 and printer P12 having two checking to two hash code and these hash code are same. So the singleton scope of the Spring Bean will be continued only when factory method based Spring Bean instantiation is enabled on singleton Java class that is configuration as singleton scope Spring Bean. Note: without taking Spring Bean class code as singleton Java class code to bring the similar effect of singleton behavior, singleton class behavior, we need to take Spring Bean scope as a singleton scope. DAO data access object. DAO data access objects. In real project, we take service class with B logic, business logic, DAO class with precedence logic, controller class with monitoring logic will be taken as the singleton scope Spring Bean because generally these classes contain no state data or fixed state or shareable state. The process of keeping different logic in the different layer and making them taking to each other is called layered application development. In that service class container B logic and DOA class contain persistence logic and controller class contains monitor logic. All singleton scope Spring Bean Spring Beans participating in pre-Jaeger and early instantiation object creation. The objects will be created the moment IOC container is created irrespective of ctx.getBean is called or not for a dependency injection are performed or not using that Spring Bean. Only for singleton scope Spring Bean this pre-instantiation taking place. So how to disable pre-instantiation of singleton scope Spring Bean? Using lazy true. Lazy annotation true along with the component or bean method to enable lazy and late instantiation on singleton scope Spring Bean. The IOC container create Spring Bean class object only when need to. They are like ctx.getBean is created having bean ID or if the Spring Bean is made dependent to another Spring Bean. So here one component WMG scope equals scope in singleton and lazy true. Okay, this message generator and app config having one bean name equals to dt and is scope singleton and lazy true. So create d11 create date 1 and return date and another bean name equals to dt2 is scope singleton and lazy true. So create date 2 and returning date. So what are different way to enable lazy and late instantiation on Spring Bean? Take in singleton scope Spring Bean enable with the lazy true. Take the Spring Bean scope as the other than singleton scope. Take the Spring Bean scope as the other than in singleton scope. 3. Make sure that your Spring Bean is not dependent to singleton scope target Spring Bean. So in XML driven configuration, we can enable lazy instantiation or single turn scope Spring Bean by using lazy hyphen in in init lazy hyphen init equals to true attribute or of bean tag. So this is application context XML are having one ID bprn1 and factory method get instance and lazy hyphen init equals to true. Another bean lazy init equals to true. So reflection API code to create object of Java class outside of the class that is having one private constructor. So constructor importing constructor and reflection API test and public static void main string through exception class equals to class for name and com.any.sto printer, and constructor cons equals to class. So constructor cons equals to class dot get declare constructor and cons dot get set accessible true and object obj1 equals to cons 0 dot new instance and object 2 equals to cons dot new instance and checking object 1 uh, not calling uh, object 1 dot get class and object 2 dot get class and calling object 1 dot hash code and object 2 has code. So note, IOC container internally use the above kind of reflection API code to get access to private constructor of the Spring Bean class to create the object. Can we place only private constructor in Spring Bean class? Yes, we can place because the IOC container use reflection API internally to get access to private constructor and to create the Spring Bean class object. Can we take Spring Bean class as the private class? Java does not allow to take a outer class as a private class. It allowed to take only inner class as a private class. Since we do not take inner class as a Spring Bean, we can say overall the Spring class cannot be taken as a private class. What are the two special properties the singleton class Spring Bean is having compared to other scope Spring Bean? The IOC container enables the pre-instantiation of singleton scope Spring Bean, and the IOC container keeps the singleton scope Spring Bean class objects in the internal cache of the IOC container for reusability. How can we get singleton class effect on Spring Bean without making the Spring Bean Spring Bean class as a singleton class? So take the Spring Bean class as the singleton scope and always try to instant the Spring Bean by using factory method bean instantiation. So this is all about Spring Bean scope. Spring Bean scope. Thank you.